that we have a quorum in just a minute, but want to make sure that any members of the public that wish to provide oral comments during today's meeting, please review the instructions posted on the redistricting webpage at www.sandiegocounty.gov/redistricting. So individuals that wish to speak must submit an online request to speak form, and we'll find out whom those might be in just a little bit. But Andrew, would you please call the roll to document we have a quorum?
Thank you, I will. And I just noticed that Mr. Boehm joined, so.
Good, okay, Dave, you got it. You got it, Dave. I just called this to order.
Here, here. Thank you.
All right. Well, before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that all commissioners are participating via teleconference. As such, all votes will be handled by roll call vote. So I'll ask the commissioners to please unmute your microphone and say here or present. Commissioner Brown?
Here.
Commissioner Katarina?
Here.
Commissioner Chen?
Here.
Commissioner Diaz? Commissioner Hanson?
Here.
Commissioner Larson?
Here.
Vice Chair Russ?
Here.
And Chair Boehm.
Here.
All right.
Good. Thank you very much. Apologies for being late. My computer only works when it feels like it. The next item is non-agenda public communication speakers. This is an opportunity for the public to address the commission on subject matters within the commission's jurisdiction, but not an item on today's agenda. The only action the commission may take is a referral to staff. Andrew, do we have any speakers to speak on an issue not on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one speaker who has requested to address the commission. The speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. So I'd like to invite Janine Ericat, and I'll go ahead and allow you to speak. Just one moment.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me all here today. Again, thank you all for all the work that you've been doing. I just had a question that came up last week. I'm wondering, I guess, about if the commission has made a decision on their counsel that their legal counsel that they'll be choosing. I know last week you all had some outside counsel, so I just wanted to ask if that contract was interim or if it was a permanent contract, and just ask you all and encourage you all to have a permanent, a transparent process and a public process when making decisions on the council, on the legal counsel. And that's all that I have. Thank you all for your time.
Great. And Chair, that concludes the comments under non-agenda public comment this afternoon, sorry.
Very good, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our November 9th regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make
So
a
moved.
motion. Nope. Go ahead.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Andrew, do you have those names?
I do not. If we could just clarify those again real quick.
Who is moving first? I heard several. Mr. Larson, Commissioner Larson, would you like? Okay, Commissioner Larson to move it. Vice Chair Russ seconding. Did I have that right?
Yes.
Okay. With appreciation to all who weighed in. Thank you. Is there any discussion about the minutes, in particular corrections or fixes? Seeing none. Andrew, could you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you. Commissioner Brown?
Approved. What do you
I'll
mean?
say aye, no, abstain.
Aye.
No. Aye, thank you.
Aye.
Commissioner Katarina?
Aye.
Commissioner Chen?
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz? Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Russ?
Aye.
And Chair Boehm.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners who are present voting aye. And I just got an email that Commissioner Diaz has joined. Let me verify if she's called in. One moment.
is it possible that Commissioner Diaz is, oh, she just joined right now.
Perfect. Guess we'll promote her over to panelist.
Hello, everyone. This is Commissioner Diaz. I don't know why I was having technical difficulties coming in, but I am here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And from one technical difficulty sufferer to another, Commissioner Diaz, more than welcome, not a problem. We've just approved the minutes, so we'll be moving along without objection, if that's okay.
Yes.
Very good. So we'll now proceed to item 6 on the agenda, selection of 6 additional commissioners. I'll turn it over now to our clerk, Andrew Potter, to provide an overview of our responsibilities to select those 6 additional commissioners. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with the Elections Code, Section 21550G, your role is to select 6 additional commissioners from the pool of the 51 remaining most qualified applicants. And as I described in the staff report and at our last meeting, the Elections Code requires the commission select the 6 additional commissioners based on the following: relevant experience, analytical skills, ability to be impartial, and ensure that the commission reflects the county's diversity, including racial, ethnic, geographic, and gender diversity. However, formulas or specific ratios are not to be applied. The 8 commissioners shall also consider political party preferences, selecting applicants so that the political party preference of the members of the commission is as proportional as possible to the total number of voters who are registered with each political party in the county of San Diego, or who decline to state or do not indicate a party preference, as determined by registration of the most recent statewide election, which was March 2020. Based on the criteria I just described, we have provided some statistics in the staff report and the current makeup of the commission to help narrow your selections, as we did at the last meeting. So first, to ensure the commission is proportional to the percentage of registered voters, at the last meeting, staff recommended that the commission focus on selecting 3 Democrats and 3 no party preference applicants. Additionally, staff presented the other demographics, such as district allocations, race, ethnicity, and gender. We also provided a table that was sorted by political parties, then last name of the pool of 51 most qualified applicants. The table included the applicant's city and zip code to assist with the geographic diversity requirement. Following the last meeting on November 9, 2020, each commissioner identified their top 6 candidates from the remaining pool that met the criteria that I just described. Commissioners emailed the names of their top 6 candidates to me, and I compiled the results and summarized the selections for the commission's consideration today. And those selections were also posted online for the public. Based on the nominations, there were 2 individuals that received 7 nominations and 3 individuals that received 6 nominations. For these 5 that received nominations from a majority number of the commissioners, which is 6 or more nominations, should these individuals be selected, the commission makeup would be as follows. So in terms of political party, it would be 5 Democrats, 4 Republicans, 4 no party preference. In terms of geography, it would be 3 individuals from District 1, 1 individual from District 2, 3 individuals from District 3, 3 individuals from District 4, and 3 individuals from District 5. And then in terms of the racial and ethnic breakdown, it would be 8% Black, African American, 31% Hispanic, 15% Asian, and 46% white. And then the gender is nearly equal at 7 females and 6 males. It would be important for the commission to focus their discussions on the applicant's relevant experience, their analytical skills, and the ability to be impartial, balancing these requirements with the other requirements to ensure a diverse commission. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. Before anything else, are there any questions from any of the commissioners or comments by legal counsel or other staff before we move on to public requests to speak? I just want to give everyone a chance to ask any questions based on what Andrew just presented.
I have a question. So with these candidates that receive the most nominations, is there going to be another, and I apologize if this was already discussed before, but, or somewhere in the previous meeting, will there be an opportunity to interview some of these that, I'm just looking at the ones that are listed here, because it seems to me that and this was an incredibly difficult decision, I know, for all of us to make. I personally read all 51 applications and took into account everybody's analytical ability, impartiality, and diversity. And so I really want to make sure we're basing our selections on what is prescribed in the law, and give people the opportunity. Because one thing to write, about yourself on paper, but it's another, it's quite else to actually get to know some of the candidates.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to address that and actually turn it over to our legal counsel, Hillary Gibson, to talk about the interviews.
Good. Yeah, I think that sounds good. So let's hear from Andrew first, if everyone's agreeable. And unless there's a related question, I think it'd be useful to let Andrew speak first, then Hillary, and then I'll offer one thought on the process side of it, based on what we hear. And Commissioner Diaz is your excellent question. Thank you. So Andrew, please.
I'm just going to turn it right over to Hillary.
Yeah, and I think Commissioner Diaz's observation about what is contemplated by the statute is a good one. So we can just start there. The statute does not prohibit interviews, but it doesn't specifically contemplate them or allow for them either. And so this would be something that's not specifically addressed by the statute. It is something that is not often done in this process. And the timeline is not on the agenda for today, but as we will discuss in coming weeks, as you see a timeline, the commission has a lot to do in this process, and we will have a very packed schedule. And interviewing candidates could slow that down and slow the selection process down quite appreciably.
And then just to add on to what Hillary talked about is, as my role was to screen all the applications that we received and narrow them down to the top 60 most qualified individuals. And to be fair for all of you that were selected out of those top 60, we didn't interview folks. And so I want to ensure that there's consistency among the selection process out of the top 60.
And I think that's a very good point that we would just echo that interviewing applicants, although the obvious intent would be to make sure that everyone is given due weight and due consideration and all of their qualifications are, very thoroughly reviewed and discussed, it could create the perception among some that they didn't get an equal shot because they weren't interviewed. And so just echoing what Andrew has just said, giving everyone a sort of equal opportunity to present their very excellent qualifications to the commission may be best served by not conducting interviews and sticking to the information the commission already has.
Before I speak, that's a lot to digest, and it's really, really useful. So thanks to both of you. Commissioner Diaz or other commissioners, do you have any comments in response to that or in reaction to that? Commissioner Larson?
Let me just make a comment. I also read all 51. In fact, I read all 59 in the beginning. And I guess if I were running this, I would have designed a questionnaire quite differently to bring out some of these issues that I think we've all had questions about. But given that we have what we have, and the 59 of us all answered, I think, to the best of our ability, but not really understanding exactly what we'd be judged against either. An interview would be wonderful, but I don't think we have time to really do this. And it's hard to do that fairly. And an interview where one person is being interviewed by a group of people is really awkward. I've gone through that several times, and it's not pleasant. So, and it also doesn't bring out the best in your abilities. So I would say that we go ahead with what we have and consider it from there.
Thank you for that.
I
Other
would-
commissioners? Barbara?
I
Sorry,
would
Commissioner.
concur. I believe that we all had the same opportunity to express ourselves, and reading through all of these applications, people certainly did present themselves in different ways. Some were very personal, some were very scientific. I mean, I got a good feeling for more than just the facts about these people. I also can't imagine how we could guarantee an equal opportunity to 51 different situations involving 51 different candidates to say at the end that all the interviews were absolutely equal. I just think it's a can of worms that we really shouldn't open.
Thank you. Anyone else?
David, can you hear me, David?
Yes, I think it's, let me see, Commissioner Russ, and then I think Commissioner Chen, did you want to add after that, if that's okay?
Very briefly, thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I-
Commissioner Russ,
just-
go ahead.
Can you hear me? I'm having some technical problems here, but you can hear me. Good, good. Now, the way I looked at it as of the original 60, of which we used to be part of the original 60, they were all screened by staff, and what a job that would be to screen all of them. But I went initially on the assumption that we were all equally qualified, equally ready for this, because we were selected by random, and the luck of the draw was that it was the 8 of us. So without any further, looking at looking at us any further. So the way I approached this was that, okay, all these other 51 folks are equally as well qualified as I, unless otherwise I find out somewhat otherwise a little bit later on down the road. I treated this as a dynamic programming type of a problem, trying to meet certain constraints. For example, the political affiliation, the gender, even the race, and the districts and the geographical location. So it's amazing to me that that out of six selections, that the preponderance of choices were these 6 that 6 of us, at least 6 out of the 8 agreed on. If you were to pick the probability of this, it's very low. There's really over 18 million possible combinations of a district from the remaining 51 people. Choosing 6 of those. So I thought, boy, this was rather serendipitous. But then what I did is I went back and I really looked at their input. And was there anything to disqualify them? Was there anything that just did not seem really was going to be helpful? That's where I really went into looking into their backgrounds. There were some others that I had chosen while I was doing the dynamic programming, that I went into their applications and looked at them. But I find it rather amazing that 5 of there were the preponderance on 5 of these folks, and so we really have only, in my view, we really have only one choice to make today. But I don't think it would be really helpful then to really bring in 51, or even if we culled it down to 10 other folks to come in, or even these 5 that have been almost unanimously selected to come in for personal interviews.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
I think it's where we're heading anyways, but just on the interviewing question, I think there's inherent subjectivity in this process. And I don't believe that interviews would make this necessarily more fair. It could actually make it less fair. So I agree with some of the comments made already. Just wanted to put that out there so we can move forward.
Appreciate it. Any other comments?
I agree with that. I think we all bring our own talents and whatever we can. You know, we're all interested in being a part of the commission. So those are the first steps. It's already been gone through as far as whether they met the qualifications or not. And we're needing to meet some parameters apparently for other things so that there'll be a representative committee. And so I don't think that we need to interview for that.
Good. Thank you. Commissioner Caterina, do you want to add to the conversation?
I am in agreement as well. Thank you.
Good. Commissioner Diaz, before I call on you, I want to be clear. I don't think anyone in this meant to say, meant to criticize you for raising, I think, a really good idea. The problem, I do agree, is one of timing and, to a degree, fairness. When I was doing my review, just for what it's worth, I came away with 3 points. One, if we're talking about the top 60 candidates, I would have finished around 108th. I don't mean that as a criticism of Andrew's screening, but it is, again, humbling how many qualified candidates there are out there. Like many of you, I also reviewed all the remaining applications and re-reviewed ours to look at what we're all bringing to the table, and a reminder of, first of all, how lucky we are to be working with each other, I think, but also a good way forward on meeting all the different duties and responsibilities we have. I do think, though, having been through 2 interviews, one very recently, for redistricting commissions, I think in this case, while it would be helpful, and especially if we had the time, I don't think it's really necessary. In another commission, it really was going to be down to that point that I think we discussed last time. People will undoubtedly be better than their written applications, especially when you're dealing with this kind of qualified group. That's not what we're trying to get at. And I know, Commissioner Diaz, that's what you were trying to raise. It was trying to make sure we've got as much information as we can to make a good decision. But all that said, I agree with the group. The nature of our timing is, and as Mr. Russ pointed out, there is a potential for moving relatively quickly on some of this, given the way the votes have emerged so far.
Mm-hmm.
With all that in mind, Commissioner Diaz, I do want to return to the floor to you. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciated hearing everyone's comment on that question. And I really do agree that there's many different forms in other cities that have approached it. I'm just looking at the city of San Diego. They had a very lengthy process for that. But I do agree that, you know, on first pass, you know, the staff making that the decision on the first 60 qualified. So it kind of made our jobs a little bit easier, but it also was very, just personally very tough to look through 51 applications. But I made the time because it's very important, and I'm going to make this an important decision. So yeah, I am fine with not, you know, doing extensive interviews or anything like that. Yeah, but if there's an opportunity for public comment on that, I would be very curious to see what the public comment would be.
And our next step will in fact be public comment. Before we leave this behind, though, I would like to just mention that this idea, like many others, I think we can keep under consideration. And if we get to the point where it's necessary, maybe call on staff and council just to make them a little nervous for some creative thinking if we need to do something along that line. But I also really appreciate the conversation, because I think this will help us in our subsequent conversation about actual selection. With that, unless there's objection, I'm going to move on to the next item within this agenda item, which is to ask for public questions or comments. Andrew, do we have any requests from the public to speak on this item?
We do, thank you. We have 3 requests to speak on this item. We also received 1 e-comment that was emailed to all the commissioners and posted online as well. Each speaker that we will call forward will have 3 minutes to address the commission. We'll be calling speakers by their name, since all of them have been logged into the Zoom meeting. You'll receive an indication that you have been unmuted. and then it will be your opportunity to speak. Please state your name for the audio record, and you'll see on the screen when your time is up. So we'll begin with Janine.
Before we start, could I just ask the other commissioners to please mute themselves just for keeping things smooth and relatively fair to our speakers? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll begin with Janine Arakat.
Everyone, again, I promise I won't make public comment multiple times in the future meetings. Again, thank you all for your time and your work on this. I wanted to thank you all on really taking in your consideration, really considering some of the recommendations we sent in our letter, taking into account the race, gender, political, and geographic diversity of San Diego County. So I just want to thank you all on that and continue to ask that you take into account all these different forms of diversity in the remaining selection of the commissioners. It's an important role and an important responsibility, and we look forward to working with you in the next year.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll call on Nancy Gwynn.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon and happy Friday. My name is Nancy. I am an organizer with the Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans. So I'm Janine's coworker. She's also from PANA. First, I just wanted to congratulate you all and thank you for all of the work that you've already done, like reading 51 applications, and for all the work that is to come. I wanted to also thank you for taking our letter into consideration and being so thoughtful in your nominations for the top 6 candidates. I see that the candidates are really diverse and that has a majority vote. So I'm really excited about that. San Diego is a majority minority county. We are extremely diverse, and I really hope that the commission can represent this diversity. So I just want to echo to please take into account racial, ethnic, gender, political, and geographic diversity in your selection. In terms of interviewing candidates, although I think it is a great idea, and it's always better to have more information about folks, I don't think it's particularly necessary at this time, particularly because there seems to be a majority vote for the top candidates. Just wanted to say thank you again. Congratulations. I hope you have a fun and safe weekend and holiday, and that you find moments of joy during these insane times. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Jacqueline Cotto.
Hi, good afternoon, commissioners. Happy Friday. My name is Jacqueline Cotto. I am calling on behalf of the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, NALEO Educational Fund. Thank you so much for the service that you are doing. I am calling to raise the Latino population representation on the current commission. Some data that I crunched up shows that 1/3 of the county's total population is Latino, but so far there's only one commissioner that is Latino that currently sits among the 8. So that barely makes up 13% of the Latino representation. So we would like to urge you that when selecting the next 6th commissioner, if you can take into account that, please consider that optimally, there should be at least one Latino representation from every supervisory district. So if you look at, for example, in supervisory district number 1, there is 31% Latino population, and supervisory district 5 has 19% of Latino population. So we wanna just raise that up and uplift those data sets for you, and hope that you take that into consideration when selecting the final 6. And I'd like to, again, thank you for your service and for the work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that concludes public comment on this item, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much to everyone. All right, now comes the interesting part. Both how we're going to do this and what we're going to do. We're now moving on to the selection process. If it's acceptable to everyone, I'd like to proceed as follows, and I promise we'll ask for discussion and informal approval before we actually get into the process. But I'd first like to suggest that we all discuss the 5 candidates that appeared on the majority of the lists, the ones that Andrew mentioned in his presentation, and talk about how each one of those candidates satisfies the statutory criteria. Now, that can include a discussion of how you applied the criteria. I think we're already well on our way to doing that, actually, with some of the things that have already been mentioned. I have some suggestions as to what we could do after that discussion to finalize our selection, but I wanted to first make sure that was okay, and also introduce a principle that I intend to follow unless there's serious objection, which is that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, which is to say, whatever we do in this kind of process, at least in my experience, there will be moments where we have a consensus. Let's say in this case, we reach an early consensus that the 5 who've received the majority of the votes are already on our list. That's great. And I'm happy to focus our discussion on one remaining slot. But I want to be clear that as far as I'm concerned in moving the process forward, we will remain open to reconsideration of anything that's been discussed previously. I'd like to make this as open and flexible as discussion as possible. With all that in mind, is that okay? Is there any objection? Very good. I'm sorry, Commissioner Caterina, did you want to say something?
I did. I just was going to ask. I was just going to ask Andrew. That makes sense to me. Andrew, is that what you recommend?
Yes, I think that sounds like a great path forward.
Good. So if it's all right, I would just suggest take a glance, if you will, at attachment A of the agenda, the list with the chart where the votes are on the far left side. And if it's acceptable to everyone, I will just ask for comments on the criteria as applied to each candidate. Please don't feel obliged to speak up or say, I agree with everyone else. You're welcome to do it, of course. But part of this is also to establish for the record the impartiality I think all of you have already described. So with that in mind, could anyone start us off with discussion of the first candidate's name on the list, Fernandez Pons?
I can do it. You want me to start? Okay.
Please.
So he was one of my top candidates. I looked at, for each candidate, I looked at every aspect of the grouping of criteria that we needed to see. The location, which I think is very important. He is from District 1, and we needed some additional representation in District 1. I looked at what his skill set was. I noticed that he had retired from 33 years of service in the Navy. And I thought that that would be very helpful, especially to a board and commission that's as large as this one. And from that perspective, I thought his background was very appropriate. I noticed that he had a Democratic Party political affiliation and that we needed to fill an additional Democratic affiliation slot. He also identifies as a Black African American, which is an important ethnic group that we need to consider. And he also identifies as male. So looking at all of those issues, he qualified. He ticked every box on my list.
Excellent. And keeping in mind that there's no specific formula or box checking under requirement other than the statutory requirements, especially in the political party side, that's important. Who else would like to comment on candidate Pons?
Yeah, David.
Please.
Can you hear me, David?
Mm-hmm.
I'm having some technical problems, so I'm going back and forth from one system to another. So, okay, good. I also picked Fernandez Pons, and for all the other reasons that were just mentioned. But one of the things too, as an admiral in the retired admiral in the Navy, and I was a Navy man, and I understand what you know, the quality, the character of men and women who make flag rank. and their experience. His application, his experience, you know, it was kind of the one thing that gave me. I would like to know more. His application was a little bit short. You know, I mean, I could have had more detail. However, there were things I could have filled in for you probably, since I had, you know, probably a very similar Navy experience. So that, and then plus there were only 4 blacks that were in our pool. There were 2 women, 2 female, 2 males. And then of course, for the district, looking at the geographic location. So there was that was probably one of the, well, that was what made it the fit. And having one black on the board, which are in the commission, that puts us at it would put us at 7% black representation, whereas the county is 5%. So you know, that's close. That's extremely close. So there were a lot of these things, and like I say, I have to admit, I was very much swayed and impressed to have a flag officer want to join our commission. I'd be very pleased with that.
Very good. Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, so a quick process suggestion, since we do have 7 of the 8 of us who selected Mr. Pons, maybe a better way to go about this for the next 5 candidates is to talk to the one person who did not select the person, and maybe instead of 7 conversations about why we agree with each other, just one conversation and see if it sways anyone.
I take your point. The additional consideration to take in this, and I admit this is after some research, is that not least because of the nature of our meeting being on Zoom, there is some advantage in having it the positive side of the equation, if you will, on the record. So that's not just assumptions that we fulfill criteria, but people are giving specific reasons. I do take your point that we've got a lot to work through on this. And that's why I was saying, I hope no one feels obliged to say it. For right now, I would leave it to the individual commissioner who didn't agree, or in some cases, the 2 who didn't agree, to speak up if they're so inclined. I certainly want to keep the voices open. And I'll ask everyone, for the moment at least, to use their judgment and keep in mind that we do want to finish by 4, and we do have at least one discussion to have that may take a little longer. Commissioner Chen, acceptable?
That's fine. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Commissioner Larson, did I see you wanting to speak?
No, I agree with the comments that have been made so far. I think we're dealing with some really outstanding people. I have to say, I did also use Google and looked up my candidates to, you know, just to get a better feeling for the breadth of what they've done. And Frederick Pons, Fernando Pons is one of the few black admirals in the Navy, and I also have a Navy background, and I'm just impressed with the quality of the selection process for admirals in the Navy. So he made it. He's one of the few. I hope there's many behind him, but I think he'd be a real asset to our panel.
Appreciate the comments. Any other comments on candidate Pons? Very good. With that in mind, I'd like to move on to candidate, I'm hoping I get the name right, Krugliak. Christina Krugliak, who also had 7. Would anyone like to speak up about their criteria applied to her?
Well, I don't want to be a floor hog, but I'll go through this. And here's what I'm thinking, commissioners, is that I'll give you my list. And if you have a disagreement or want to add something, then all of the points will be considered on the record, if that makes sense.
It'll be on the record anyway, but that's great. We can kind of,
yeah, it might make it smoother.
We all at least agree in general. So that's fantastic. Please.
So I chose her based on a number of, again, the same bucket list, if you will. of things that we would desire. I found her background, her analytical background, to be spot on. And I felt that her background in informatics especially would help us, because we're going to be looking at a lot of data. And it will be very important to have somebody amongst us who is fluent in analyzing large data sets. I also liked her because she had a no party preference political affiliation, and I wanted to keep that political party balance appropriate as we need to. Other key factors that helped me with my decision is that she resides in District 3, that she identifies as a Hispanic Latino. I absolutely think we need to have a diverse board, and she also identifies as female. So we now are looking at 1 male, 1 female, so we're keeping it balanced. And that's exactly what I looked at with all these, was balance. So that's my quick summary.
No, excellent. Anyone have something to add? Commissioner Diaz?
Yeah, I agreed with Amy's evaluation. It was exactly spot on to mine as well. And I think having somebody with the knack for data and the love of data is going to be so important and a great asset for this commission.
Very good. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Very good. So following what I will start calling the Katarina principle, we will assume everyone was comfortable applying that data, the criteria in that way. I will again just state for the record that we are very consciously aware of the statute as laid out, and that the political party criterion does have further standing than the others. But I think those, as well as applying our own wisdom, is very helpful. And my compliments again to all my fellow commissioners on thinking through this so carefully. The next candidate I have on my list from attachment A is Lydia Dostal. Would someone like to comment on their application criterion for her? Commissioner Diaz?
Yeah, I know we spoke about in the last meeting. I just wanted to clarify, just because one commissioner serves on a different commission and different jurisdiction, that doesn't preclude her from serving on this one. So I just, keeping that in mind, I also took into consideration but the fact that she had a wealth of experience, but also was from a district that we needed more representation from, District 1, also party affiliation. And yeah, I think in identifying as Hispanic, so we needed more Hispanic representation. So yeah, she was definitely on my list as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Any additional comments on candidate Dostal? Good. Moving along. Candidate Carmen Rosette Garcia. Would anyone like to speak regarding her application and candidacy?
I was already unmuted. Okay. I also love this candidate. Her educational background, her career experience, as well as her volunteer board experiences and knowledge of the Brown Act is going to be very helpful. She will be able to seamlessly enter our commission and operate, I believe, very efficiently. She does have a no party preference political affiliation, again, trying to keep that very important balance. And again, she resides in a district where we needed additional representation in District 5. She also identifies as Hispanic Latino, which is very important to just make sure that our community is represented properly. And she identifies as female.
Great summary. Thank you. Additional comments? Good. Thank you very much. Moving on. I hope I'm saying the name correctly. the last of the 5 that received the majority of the votes, Ramses Sorban. Would anyone like to address his candidacy? And criterion applied there too.
Want me to go ahead?
I would. If
Oh,
I
good.
could. I know I was, I actually, I read his vita here with a great deal of interest. I would have liked a bit more meat to it. Like I always want more than less, obviously. And he's identifying as Asian, but as a Pacific Islander, I believe he's probably Filipino. We have quite a Filipino population here in San Diego. And that he, you know, he practiced law. It really seems that, you know, he has come from you know, from really an initial endowment that is, you know, he's overcome some of that. I think at least that's the sense I get. Of course, I don't know because there wasn't a lot of information. I like I say, I would have liked more. I did like. Well, for example, for Asian, just looking at the number, just a minute, we really don't have the number of Asians that we had that were, there were only 5, and we needed really kind of one more. Certainly to kind of, I think we have what, 15% in the county. So we needed one more. So there were a number of things. Also his, he was also no party preference. So one of the 3 that we really would be good to fill with that criterion. And again, a male, just kind of balancing out the male female ratio there. So I chose him as well.
Very good. Thank you for that. Commissioner Diaz, did you want to comment, please?
Yeah, I was quite impressed with the fact that, well, also based my decision on the party affiliation as declined to state, and we needed to take that into consideration and keeping that in mind. But also, it's interesting that it participated on a county study on voter participation and helped gather all that public testimony to put that together for the state redistricting process in 2010. So that I found that kind of interesting that he pointed that out in his application. The fact that we do need Asian representation as well, but mostly the party affiliation just kind of, you know, check the box for me and that experience. Also, I do want to make a comment too about gender. I want to be very, very careful not to say I picked this person because of their gender, because as we know, we're kind of eliminating a whole group of the gender neutral, non-binary folks out there. So I just want to caution this commission of using that, the gender.
Thank you. And if I might, just to make sure we're all on the same page with that, I'm taking kind of as an assumption that when we talk about gender as a criterion and the overall balance of diversity, that we're addressing just what you said, that gender is as wide as is documented, and I think is in several of the papers we've talked about, and is certainly in a lot of the statutory requirements, as well as just the recommendations. So I think the central point there that we want to represent and include as much diversity as we possibly can, both among the commissioners, and I would speculate to say in our ongoing work. I think it's a very valuable point, and I appreciate you making that. Thank you. Any other comments on candidate Sorban? Very good. That takes us through the top 5. I've tried to be a little quiet on my part, but I will say that I followed the same general process in applying the criteria, not just to one candidate, but kind of looking back. And after looking through 3 that I thought, okay, that's a good balance so far. Then when I got to the 4th one, looking back and saying, okay, where does that leave us? And one thing I noticed is that if we work from the statutory criteria and go with the 5 that we've selected, then, and I think council would agree on this, we have somewhat locked ourselves in, again, at least in principle for the moment, to choosing someone with the Democratic Party on our as our 6th candidate. Now that's if we decide to move forward with these 5. Hillary, do you want to comment on that?
That's exactly right, Chair Boehm. The statute generally requires the commission to engage in a holistic consideration of applicants, various qualifications to serve on the commission, and says no formulas, no ratios, with the exception of political party preference. So that is the one thing that should be tracking that data that you have closely.
Very good. All right. Before I make suggestions on next steps, now that we've completed at least initial discussion on those 5, and at the risk of having Commissioner Chen remind me that we can't be here all day, I appreciate it. It's important. Are there any additional comments about these 5 candidates that haven't been stated that you want to make sure other commissioners hear? Very good. Thank you again so much for the conversation. I would like to suggest that we agree in principle then on the 5 candidates who've received the most nominations, the ones we just discussed, that our plan be to include them on our list of 6, provided that in our subsequent discussion, we don't need to move back. That would allow us to work on the rest of the list for the 1 remaining slot with due regard to that political party criterion that we have to meet. Is that acceptable to everyone? That we're just going to put those 5 together? We'll take a formal vote later for all 6, unless council or staff have a different opinion. Commissioner Chen?
I'm just going to say, yeah, I agree. Yes, that's acceptable to me.
Okay, great. Is there any objection? Excellent. Thank you all. All right. Now, to my mind, there are 3 ways to proceed on the remaining slot. One is to discuss all the remaining candidates, including the ones who did not receive a vote. One would be to discuss the remaining 11 candidates who did receive at least 1 nomination, if I'm doing my math correctly. The others would be to discuss either the 2 or the 3 candidates who received more than 1 vote. In other words, if I'm reading attachment A correctly, candidate Inman had 3, candidate Mendoza had 3. So I think for any discussion, we're going to need to consider those 2. Then it becomes a question of, do we include the rest who received a vote down to candidate Swanson on that list on attachment A? Do we include candidates Inman, Mendoza, and Yang on the basis that they received multiple votes? Or do we just consider the 2 who received 3 votes, candidates Inman and Mendoza? Commissioner Larson, please.
Yes, I agree that we should consider only those nominees who received more than 1 vote. I think we've all gone through this. Many of these candidates are really difficult to balance in total, but we all managed to do it somehow. So we have the results as they are. And I think considering the 3 that had, 2 had 3 votes each and 1 had 2 votes, I think just looking at those 3 might be all we have to really do today.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Potter, you will advise us if we need to be taking a formal vote on any of this, but I'm considering all this part of process, and therefore we can continue in kind of an informal way.
Yes, you're doing fine.
Good. Commissioner Hanson, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to include anyone that had more than 1 vote.
Okay.
So the top 3.
So I'm hearing an emerging consensus that we will consider Commissioners Inman, Mendoza, and Yang, all of whom meet the statutory criteria, I think, that's required at this point. They're all registered with the Democratic Party. Is there any objection to focusing our discussion on those three? Excellent. So with that in mind, we've already heard a couple of times about the different criteria and diversity from the commissioners, I think from some of the public comments. I do think the challenge we'll face on this one, not that you don't already know it yourselves, is that some of these candidates satisfy one set of criteria, but don't satisfy others. Others satisfy that second set, but not the first. And we're going to have to make some choices. I would just encourage you to be as broad as possible. I don't need to say that because we're already doing that so well. I'd prefer for right now to just have it as an open discussion. I'm happy to, we'll make sure to discuss all three, but rather than me guide it to any one, could I just ask if any commissioners have any strong feelings about any one of the three that we're talking about? Again, candidates Inman, Mendoza, and Yang.
I'd like to speak about Mr. Yang.
Please.
He is a Democrat. He is an Asian, but he has a unique background because he came to this country as a refugee from Burma. He has reached extraordinary heights considering the background that he came with. I worked for one of the refugee agencies during the years when that Burmese population came here. They were totally unprepared for life in America, much less in a civilized city. And to see a young man who has reached the heights that he has, he's getting his PhD now. He also has worked for the police department on community policing for over 24 years. He lives in District 5, but he works in District 2 or 3 and 4 for the police department. He, it just seems to me that he brings a perspective that does not necessarily overlap with any of the other candidates that we are talking about. So that's why he was one of the choices that I made first.
Let me just clarify, when you say from any of the other candidates, you're not just referring to the two others we're discussing now. You're saying,
no, I'm just saying the group as a whole. I mean, being a police officer, city policing, being extraordinarily well educated. He's getting his PhD now, and he's just he's still he's younger than a lot of us. He's 45 to 55. And as far as District 5 is concerned, that is a huge geographical area. And the other two people that are currently on the commission or we've just discussed live in Valley Center and Rancho Santa Fe. And he lives in San Marcos, which is a wholly different perspective on District 5. I know that probably gives overrepresentation to District 5, but I would just hate to eliminate somebody of this caliber based on that.
I, for one, can't thank you enough for doing your homework on that. Thank you for all that detail. It's very helpful.
Yang was on my short list. I'm very impressed. I really have nothing negative to say. He had very good, wrote a very good document, gave me some information. The downside, if there's a downside, if you will, is that there would be an overrepresentation in District 5 because there'd be 3 now with the initial the 5 that we've just talked about, and that would put it to 4. And we have one district now with the 5 addition. It only has 1, which is also a very large district. That's District 2, extremely large. But he and Asian that would certainly really overrepresent perhaps that proportion of the of the population, but no, this guy is extremely impressive. Yeah,
Well,
and
and not only is
he was on my short list, and but I ended up going another way because of some of these other considerations.
He's
Commissioner
also represents the refugee community, which is an extremely unique perspective. And the refugee community doesn't live in District 5, actually, they live in District 2, but they also live everywhere. But I don't know, like you said, we're going to have to fudge a little on one of the criteria. And so if it were that one, I think that would be the least impactful.
Commissioner Diaz.
Yes, I really want to see where our breakdown would be. I mean, as far as the political party affiliation, and taking that into account seriously. Again, I do not doubt any of the qualifications of these candidates, but I would like to put that as a priority.
For what it's worth, I think all of us agree on that. I think the good news, again, if I'm looking at the chart right, and I'll ask Mr. Potter to confirm, but the three candidates we're talking about right now, Inman, Mendoza, and Yang, all satisfy the statutory criteria of us getting one more Democrat. That would give us the 3 and 3 Democrat and non-party preference that we need, correct?
That's correct. Yes, Mr. Chair.
So we're good on the political party side with these three. If we wanted to go off to other candidates, yeah, then we might have an issue. But I think the issue is much more some of the factors we've been discussing with regard to geographic diversity, ethnic background, and some of the other criteria we've discussed.
Considering the demographic breakdown of San Diego County, I'm very concerned that we don't have enough Latino representation. And I really encourage that at least one of these three be a Latino.
Yeah.
And that's really, I don't see anyone else. I mean, if we're just looking at these three,
right. Mr. Mendoza.
That's already one. There's only one.
Right.
So I would really wish there would be another candidate that we would consider as in addition to that. But I know we've already agreed on those that have only had more than one vote.
Right. Although I'll ask for one moment on this. I believe there were only 2 other Hispanics.
That's true, and they're both from District 4, which is already overrepresented.
Right, and I one of the reasons I suggested going with the construct of either the 3 multiple votes or the 11, if you will, who received a vote, was that when I went through the list and did some other balancing, it wasn't just the geographic overrepresentation of District 4, it was that there were other criteria that became even more complicated. It's not to say that, certainly it's not to say that anyone's unqualified, and certainly not to ignore the valid point you raise. Frankly, I would have been a lot less comfortable with a limited look at 3 candidates if one hadn't, if you will, self-identified as Hispanic. That said, I think we might have, I don't know that it would help us to consider the others, but I meant it when I said I want this to be an open process. Commissioner Diaz, if you think now, or if you want to take a few minutes and review some of the others, if there's more that you want to bring to the discussion on some of the others, I'm sure we could at least incorporate it into the discussion.
So I did do the percentage breakdown when I looked at the group. And so right now we're at 29% who identify as Hispanic or Latino. And to me, we need to be at that 30% number. I don't know that we can get 1% of a person in here, if you follow me. So, you know, in my mind, having 29% who identify as Hispanic, and then we would be able to have both representation for Asian and African American groups, as well as someone who identifies in two groups. So I felt like when I looked at this structure with the 5 initial top picks, I could definitely see that we had a very nice ethnic balance. And in addition, all the other factors kind of rolled into place as well.
As far as geographic, I definitely want to see the geographic distribution. I couldn't tell from the chart because I had it on a separate page of the zip codes of where people were living. But if we have overrepresentation, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, is which of the districts seems to be lacking?
District 2, I believe.
Just District 2?
So when I looked at this, I'll throw my 2 cents in now. Of the 3 candidates that are remaining, I thought District 2 needed more representation. So I looked at Kenneth Inman very closely. I do believe with the 5 we've already selected, we've handled most of our racial, ethnic diversity issues. And I thought Mr. Inman's background, given how he's worked on data analytics and specifically looking at gerrymandering, redistricting, visualization of bias, that type of thing, was just spot on to the task we have before us. So I thought he was extremely well qualified. And then added to that, his residence in District 2, I thought made him a strong candidate.
Good, thank you for that. Andrew, do you want to weigh in at this point on just geographic balance and some of the other things that have been discussed from a staff point of view?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In terms of the geographic breakdown, what we're looking at for the districts, as was indicated, for all the districts right now with the 5 that have been set aside, all of them have 3 commissioners, except for District 2 right now only has 1 commissioner. Now, keep in mind, Districts 2 and 5 are primarily unincorporated area. And so the Board of Supervisors essentially serves as their city council, if you will. We are their local government in terms of their representation and serving their local needs. But as far as the statutory requirements, and Hillary can chime in if she wants, but the statute, it requires that there be representation in each district, and right now that is met. So there's 1 commissioner that represents each of the 5 supervisorial districts, so that requirement is met. Now, in terms of the overall geographic diversity, does this mix represent the overall geographic diversity of the region? That's something that the commission needs to, all of you are working to determine at this point.
Sorry, the commission isn't statutorily required with respect to anything other than the political affiliations, which we've already talked about, achieve a perfect balance. And, the commissioners are doing exactly what they're statutorily required to do right now, which is engage in a comprehensive discussion of everyone's qualifications and the things that they bring to the table in order to balance those statutory criteria to select the remaining commissioners.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Chairman.
Please.
Okay. You can hear me, right?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, good. Like I say, I'm having technical problems. I have to go back and forth here. Yeah, I looked at this, and now that you have 5 of the 6 pretty much set, it limits your degrees of freedom. And I'm looking at District 1, which is a big one, goes all the way out in East County. District 4 is North County. And I think it's important to have that geographic diversity. So in that regard, the three vote getters actually were both from the 3 vote getters that we're talking about. One was from District 2, the other 2 is from District 4. certainly if we were not going to care whether we overpopulate District 4 and underpopulate District 2, Yang at District 4 is just head and shoulders. But now you've got the over representation, if you will, of the Asian community. But I'm feeling that since we're limited in our degrees of freedom now, that really the district populating the districts really trumps pretty much everything else, and that's why I put in Inman to at least get 2 representatives in District 2.
Okay, thank you for that.
I selected Mendoza kind of because we came down to where we didn't have a non-binary in there. And he's very young, between 25 and 34. We don't have anybody in that age bracket either. Not that that's a consideration, but it can bring a different point of view to things. So those were my 2 reasons for selecting him in particular.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Diaz?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Brown. Mendoza was on my list originally, and I think he brings with him he seems a very, very passionate individual, very politically active in his community. And I think, again, we want to emphasize these different characteristics of our commissioners and their experiences, their lived experiences and professional experiences as valuable assets. And, you know, I'm very much on the fence of what we're between these 3, but I'm leaning more towards Mendoza. So I can delve in a little deeper onto like looking at my notes if you want to.
Since we haven't talked about candidate Mendoza specifically beyond what Commissioner Brown was saying, is there anything you want to add from what you saw in his candidacy to the discussion?
Actually, the fact I'm curious to know that if there are any of the current commissioners that has his membership in City Heights, because I see that he was a former member of the City Heights Town Council, and City Heights and North Park area, Mid-City area is a very, very diverse community, and I know that he has a deep appreciation for that diversity. And part of his past work and responsibilities were to develop and coordinate diversity and inclusion programming at the college campus that he worked at. So I think that those, in terms of analytical skills, he lists effectively working with others, consensus building techniques, effective communication, public speaking, and critical questioning strategies that he has taught and also advised people on. So I feel like that is also a good asset to have, to bring to the table. And sorry, I'm just scrolling through my notes here. But yeah, that's what I would like to add.
I have a quick question. Since this map we're drawing is going to be good for a 10-year period, and there's going to be a lot of changes in San Diego over those 10 years, do we have to anticipate that with our mix that we have? I mean, how do we go about doing that? Or like, let's say all of a sudden the Hispanic community becomes 50% of our population instead of where they are now. And here I know it's just us right at this point in time, but what happens then? Does it affect that much as a map, or?
I'll ask staff and council to comment on that if they care to. From my perspective, I think that's exactly the point of these additional insights and wisdom that everyone's contributing, because I think the greater awareness there is within the commission of these different groups from all backgrounds, the better able we are to have some anticipation of that discussion. I don't think it's a requirement as such, but I think it's a very good way to think about things, that this will last for quite a while, and it needs to be designed, whatever we come up with as a plan, in a way that has the best chance of meeting those needs. Let me ask Andrew and Hillary if they have anything to add on that.
I'll just add, Commissioner Brown, you are right on target in terms of the role of this commission. And as soon as the census data is released next year, and hope that that is going to be occurring in the spring of next year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that timeframe, but that's exactly what you'll be doing, is looking at how the population is affecting the representation for each of these districts. And Chairman Boehm, you were right on target as well in talking about that's part of the reason this statute exists, is to ensure that there is representation on this commission that is drawing those lines. Turn it over to Hillary if she has some additional comments.
But in terms, no, that's right, Andrew. In terms of the things that the commissioners are required to consider by statute when selecting the remaining 6 commissioners, you are not statutorily required to anticipate demographic changes that may happen in the future. But it is certainly, an appropriate consideration as part of your thoughtful deliberations that you're engaging in right now to, to make some tough choices between very qualified candidates.
Very good. Now I am getting a little more conscious of the time. It's 3:15. Unless anyone has anything pressing to add, could I suggest we take what would amount to a straw vote? I'm sorry.
Oh, I did have one quick thing, if you don't mind, David.
Please, please.
I just wanted to say that these 3 candidates, in my mind, were all fabulous. They all brought something unique to the table. And one of the issues, and the reason that I chose Inman over the other 2, one was the District 2 issue. I was very concerned that if we did not have, if, say, for example, the person who now is in District 2 cannot make a meeting, then District 2 is not represented. And that makes it difficult, right? So that was kind of what was driving me, but I also know that a lot of the data that we're going to be looking at is going to be drawn off of GIS data. And this is the geospatial analysis is one of Inman's specialties. So from a perspective of a skill set, I thought he added that extra little bit, but to me, they all were fabulous.
Very good. And I, again, want to echo, I think, what several of you said. It's not just these 3 that are fabulous. If we had the flexibility, I would love to find a way to incorporate everyone on this list, because it is a massive job. But given where we are, here's where we are. So let me suggest then we take what amounts to a straw poll. I'll ask each of you for the 2 you would recommend. I'll ask each of you to keep track if you feel like it, but Andrew, could you keep track as we go and see where we end up? And then let's see where we are. Pending any other comments before we do a straw poll, straw vote. Any other comments to make? Very good. Andrew, do you want to just work us down the list?
Yes, be happy to. Okay, let's begin with Kenneth Inman, and I'll just go alphabetically by commissioners. So Commissioner Boehm. Chair Boehm.
Actually, do you mind if I wave and go at the end, because I
No
want to
problem.
check one more percentage, please? Thank
Yep,
you.
sounds good. Commissioner Brown.
My 2 votes will not include him.
Okay, got it.
No.
Commissioner Katerina.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Chen
Yes.
and Commissioner Diaz.
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Russ.
This is for Inman, is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay, yeah, yes.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
And Chair Boehm.
Good, I'll vote yes.
Okay. All right. And so then we will move on to Commissioner applicant Mendoza. And I'll begin with Commissioner Brown
Yes.
and Commissioner Katerina,
No.
Commissioner Chen,
No.
Commissioner Diaz,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson,
No.
Commissioner Larson,
No.
and Commissioner Russ.
No.
Okay, and then lastly will be applicant
Would I get
Yang.
a vote on that one?
Oh, sorry, Chairman Boehm, I apologize.
Okay. No, it's all right. I'll go ahead and vote yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And applicant Yang. And I'll begin with Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
Commissioner Katerina,
No.
Commissioner Chen,
Yes.
Commissioner Diaz,
No.
Commissioner Hanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Larson,
Yes.
Commissioner Russ,
No.
and Chair Boehm.
Vote no.
All right. So looking at the,
What are you doing, a split vote?
Well, this is why I want it to be a straw vote while Andrew's counting, because one thing I want to make sure we're aware of are some of the percentages that come up as a result of what we might be selecting. Again, this is not the final vote. This is just to see where we might be.
just to confirm, I don't have a second person from Commissioner Katerina or from Commissioner Russ.
Oh, I still on. I would say yes to Yang.
Okay. And Commissioner Russ, Vice Chair Russ?
Yeah, I would say yes to Yang as well.
Okay. All right, so that leaves us with applicant Inman has 7 straw votes, if we will, and Mendoza has 3, and Mr. Yang has 6.
Okay.
Okay.
So if I might, Andrew, and we can give you a moment for this, I'd like to suggest that Andrew inform us in particular how selecting, well, let's wait a minute. We may not need to do that. All right. So we have Inman and Yang. One way to do this would be to ask for one more, in effect, straw vote on whether we reduce the look to Inman or Yang and put Mendoza in the side group because of the relative percentages. Let me ask in particular the 2 other commissioners who voted for Mr. Mendoza. Would that be acceptable at this stage, given the number of votes, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, that's fine with me.
Okay.
Fine with me. Do you need an alternate in there at all in case one of the commissioners decides not to join?
My understanding, but Andrew, I'll ask you to confirm, is that we do not need an alternate, but if something was to come up subsequently, we might have to enter a new selection process where we would draw on these notes and proceedings.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct, yes.
Good. So,
I'm fine with those 2.
and
Inman
who else
and
was the commission? I'm sorry.
I'm fine with Inman and Yang too.
Okay. Commissioner Diaz, you're the other Mendoza vote? You want to collect your thoughts a little more?
Sorry, I was on. Sorry, I was on mute. I
Please
I
go
don't
ahead.
know how I feel about this, but I'm leaning. I would say I would just let you know right now that I'm leaning more towards Inman. But if it has to come down to Yang and Inman, if I just make that clear. But I do appreciate the input from everyone on the commission.
Good.
To their decision.
And as the other commissioner who mentioned candidate Mendoza, I do think some of the points that were brought out are important, particularly the lack of representation of some of those other qualities and characteristics and experience. And I would be very, very, very interested early in our work to look at how we could meet that. While I appreciate Commissioner Katerina's comments, and I think others that were pretty close on the ethnic percentage, I think there's also been enough public hearing input and enough knowledge, I think we all share of the county, that we be very careful about how we proceed. not to detract from qualities of any other candidates, particularly the two remaining ones. But we do have the list that we have. And just as an example, separate from this consideration, I would hope that the next time this happens in 10 years, that there's a serious effort to recruit more candidates from District 2, which would have been immensely helpful for us to meet our criteria. But I want a pony for Christmas as well. So
We may have 8 districts this time.
and we might be on that track, right? With 10 years out. So, all right. So with that in mind, is there any?
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Is there at any point, I mean, do we have to make a decision today at this meeting? Or does it have to be, because that,
Before the end of the year.
I understand that, you know, the concern of not having any representation in District 2, but really we have already fulfilled the statutory requirement. All commissioners right now, we have at least one in each district. So whether or not somebody's absent should at one meeting should not make a difference. We have fulfilled that representation. So from a diversity standpoint, I would really love Mendoza to be on this commission.
Very good. Let me offer two. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Think about that for, you know, what kinds of qualities Mendoza brings. And it's almost like I feel really, I'm setting my personal feelings aside for a minute and trying to think bigger picture. So how, does anyone want to comment on that, the whole District 2 issue? Because I'm not still, I haven't quite.
So I'd like to make a quick comment. Statutorily, we don't even have to pay attention necessarily to racial, ethnic percentages either. This is about perception and looking like we've done this in a fair manner. That's what I would say.
I have to agree with that.
Good. Let me just mention, because I should have said it at the beginning. Again, I want to be very careful, given that we are in our seats by luck of the draw, literally, that if anyone feels like when we get to the final stage, we need more time and we need to have another meeting, I'm certainly open to discussion of that. I won't presume that in moving the process forward to make a decision on that by myself, but I do take Ms. Commissioner Diaz's comments very, very carefully and to heart. If any of us have that kind of question in these hard decisions, I want to make sure, if at all possible, within the bounds of the logistics and the time frame we have, that we do have to have a commission if we required by December 31st, I believe. But we can take the time to do it with just a little more time on our behalf. That said, let me just add, when I mentioned District 2, I was being somewhat facetious in saying, I wish we had a longer list of people who had made it to this point. But that's a very different question from where we are now. So Commissioner Diaz, I promise you, we will have a discussion about whether we're concluding business today. The short answer is there's certainly nothing statutorily that says we have to decide today. There's not even something that has to say we have to formally approve the 5 and then we'll leave the 1 for discussion later. I intend to run this process as openly as possible, but I do want to respect the majority and the consensus when available of this current group. So we'll talk through that, I promise. Is there anything more, though, I didn't mean to cut you off either, that you wanted to say regarding candidate Mendoza? Okay. Sorry.
No, thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you again. All right, so one more time, unless there's objection, my intention is to move to a discussion, hopefully short, of candidates Inman and Yang. Not seeing any objection. Okay. I'm going to ask that we keep this at least initially to 5 minutes, and I will keep an eye on the clock. But given what's been said, And given the applications we've all seen, are there any additional comments on either candidate Inman or candidate Yang?
Yes, one other thing.
Please.
Okay. You can hear me again?
Yes.
You can hear me? Good, good. Okay. One other thing on Inman that impressed me, and I don't know that it was mentioned, but his PhD in economics and his work in actually in districting, redistricting, demographics, very, very impressive. This is a skill set that is needed. And I think that we need to, and the other thing, as I said, we need a more representation in District 2. Maybe I'm being rather parochial here because I'm the only guy in District 2. And it's a big district. It is East County. We're kind of, we like to say that we're the city in the country. So we do have a different perspective, perhaps. And that would be good to include that, make sure that it's still going to be the least represented district, but the other thing is, I kind of think that trumps a lot of other things. But as far as Inman and his experience and his background and his skill set, I think they're superior.
Very good. Other comments on either candidate?
Andrew, for those other skills that he exhibits, the having been on a redistricting, is that something that would be available to us as a professional level, where you have somebody available that could kind of guide us if we haven't had the experience in that area, that would help us make up our minds without having to have a member necessarily having had those skills?
Yes, that will, as part of the planning process, we'll be talking about various consultants and other experts that will be helping supporting this commission.
So although it would be very nice to have somebody on the commission that has that skill set, we could have it available to us through another means of a.
Without advocating one way or the other, I would point out, Andrew, please correct me if I'm wrong. One of the advantages of someone with those qualities and some of the others we've selected is that they can validate or ask further questions of the inputs and reporting we get from consultants and others. Andrew, is that a fair way to put it?
That's a fair way to put it, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Commissioner Larson.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree with that. I think Inman would be the best choice among the two.
Okay. Commissioner Diaz.
I too was very impressed with Inman's background in the GIS. I thought that would be a very valuable asset. I have nothing else different than what other commissioners have already said. If it really came down to those two, between Yang and Inman, I would, like I've said before, lean towards Inman, even though my other preference was a different candidate. Thank you.
Good.
I agree. I especially because we need another representative from District 2. I think, everyone is qualified, but I think Inman is the better choice between these two now.
Okay. Let me ask a clarifying question regarding both candidates. Is it fair to say that everyone here would agree that both these candidates will be able, especially if asked, to reach out to other communities that they are not members of and be able to exercise expertise and energy in getting in helping the commission be more aware of all these different communities?
Isn't that required of all of us?
Yeah,
it should be, but I want to be very I want to put it on the record that we all feel that both these candidates would be able to reach out beyond their self-identified groups.
mm-hmm.
I think it is true, Commissioner Hanson. I think you're absolutely right. I just wanted to get it on the record.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Sorry, Commissioner Diaz.
I actually really do appreciate that you asked that question. I too have asked that, trying to gain that sense from looking at the application itself on the last question. I would say that in the case of Inman, it says that he does describe his community volunteer work. And the understanding the key demographic differences across neighborhoods during the course of his professional experience. I would say that would give sort of a sense, but I don't know, because I don't know. I haven't, like I said, it's one thing to write on paper what you do and, how you would respond, in person. But, and far as Yang, the fact that he identifies from a community and has worked in his profession with diverse communities, I would say that gives him a sense of understanding of an appreciation for, in particular, the refugee community as well, which I really appreciated hearing and learning about that.
Very good. I do want to ask Commissioner Chen and Commissioner Katarina, since they haven't had a chance or haven't offered any comments in a little bit, and I may propose a straw vote, but let me give each of you a chance if you're interested.
I've said my piece. Thank you.
Very good.
Me too.
Okay, very good. I will say just one other factor we haven't discussed, and I might have mentioned earlier, but let me mention it now. I do have in mind also that we're going to have a mission of communication and public awareness. I think both these candidates bring that. I think candidate Mendoza does as well. But in candidate Yang case in particular, I see some skills there that would really, really be helpful. I think candidate Inman contributes in a slightly different way on that, but that also reflects my continuing effort to figure out how well do we need to have a knowledge of each district and representation from each district geographically. And that's something I'm wrestling with. All right, with that, let me ask for closing comments. And then if it's okay, I'm going to ask for one more straw poll. Any other comments? Good. Unless there's objection, then Andrew, I would ask you to take us through a vote where each commissioner votes either for candidate Inman or candidate Yang. Is there any objection to proceeding on that? Again, a straw vote. Very good. Andrew?
Okay, I'll just go call on each of you and just indicate either Inman or Yang. We'll begin with Commissioner Brown.
Inman.
Okay, and Commissioner Katarina?
Inman.
And Commissioner Chen?
Inman.
And Commissioner Diaz?
You can abstain from this vote if you choose.
I abstain.
Okay.
And Commissioner Hanson?
Inman.
Commissioner Larson?
Inman.
And Vice Chair Russ?
Inman. Inman.
And Chair Bain?
I will for Yang.
Okay. That leaves us with 6 straw votes for Inman and 1 straw vote for Yang with 1 abstention.
Very good. All right. With that in mind, we can either, well, one way to do this would be what amounts to a no objection procedure, which would be, is there consensus that we will move candidate Inman to the list of 6 and then have a formal vote after we consider whether to vote today? The other way to do it would be to have a little more discussion, but I'm not sure there's anything to add, especially given the vote, and especially I'm willing to go that way. Is it all right then to establish a list of 6 that includes candidate Inman?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see any objection. So done. All right. So the list of 6 we have before us now is the previous 5 plus candidate Inman. Andrew, for the record, do you want to just read the names so we have that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So the list includes, we'll go in alphabetical order here. I'm just going to go in order that they were presented. Fernandez Pons, Christina Krugliak, Elidia Dostal, Carmen Rosette Garcia, Ramesses Serban, and Kenneth Inman.
Everyone agrees that's the list we've put together? Very good. Now, again, I do not want to put pressure on any one commissioner on this, but I do want to see if there is any, well, I'll tell you what. I would suggest we have a motion to go to a vote to approve that list of 6.
So
When
moved.
we get the discussion of that motion, thank you, Commissioner Larson. I promise you will be the mover if we have it. But as part of that discussion, to fulfill my obligation to all of you, but particularly Commissioner Diaz, we will have a short discussion of whether we want to vote today, and then move to a vote. Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. Do I have a motion from the floor, Commissioner Larson, to approve all 6?
Well, yes, I move what you just said.
Very good.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Chen. Very good.
Right. Sorry, I messed up there. I'm so sorry. I wanted to. So
I
we
don't
are
need to
taking
move
an
it too
official
fast.
vote right now.
I'm sorry?
We are, just point of clarification, we are taking an official vote on all 6.
We are moving to a discussion about a vote on all 6.
Okay. I misunderstood. Sorry.
Actually, no, it's my fault for not explaining it well. We are now, but for the record, this is how we tend to work through rules of, through the various Robert's Rules of Order and the variations thereof. What happens is you make a motion, you get a second, then you have a discussion on that motion. And we can certainly have another motion before we vote that would say we've decided to not vote today. But I want to have a brief discussion of it, both to fulfill that obligation, but also to discuss other options if we decide not to vote today, what we'll actually do.
And to clarify for Commissioner Diaz, this is not voting on the 6. This is a motion to discuss whether we should vote on the 6 today.
Correct. Okay. So with that, shall we have a discussion? And Commissioner Diaz, am I right in guessing you might want to speak first? No. Okay. Are there any points for discussion? Does anyone wish to discuss the motion about whether to vote today?
So
Go ahead. Oh,
I was just going to say that I think given that it seems like we have not a consensus, but close to a consensus on the 6 commissioners that we might like to appoint, the issue would be, what would we gain by waiting? Is there further information or something that might change people's minds? So that's what I'd like to discuss to see if that might, what delaying will how it will help us.
Commissioner Diaz, did you want to speak now?
I would just say that, again, okay, we're in November right now, and the Thanksgiving break is coming up, and I'm wondering if sometimes, we can give it a good thought, maybe after the Thanksgiving break, and then as long as we fulfill the deadline of December 31st, that will give enough opportunity also for the public to also, because this is a public process, if we can just give a little bit of time to allow for anybody who wants to send in public comment on the 6 that we've are considering at this meeting. Because I think that we just have that, we owe it to the people of San Diego to, in the spirit of making this a thoughtful deliberation.
Thank you.
Andrew, can you kind of fill us in on what the timeline will be once we form the commission? Are we going to be on hold for a few months? I mean, if we delay this for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, is it no big deal because as long as we get it done before the end of the year, we're okay? Or is it going to be imposing on other things that we might be able to get to before the end of the year that will prep us for what's coming up to do the job we have to do?
Yes, I'm happy to address that. There are lots of responsibilities for this commission that are coming before you. And the intent is that we would spend a meeting or two before the end of the calendar year taking care of some mandatory training, which would include some more in-depth training on the Brown Act, and just going over your general responsibilities and talking a little bit about the timeline. And so having that opportunity before the end of the calendar year would be really helpful to get those initial sort of organizational items out of the way. This commission, once fully formed, will also need to consider formal bylaws. We'll need to go through the selection process for a chair and vice chair. And so there are some logistical things that we would like to accomplish before the end of the calendar year, if possible, but certainly not mandatory. There is going to be a period of time early on between January and March when the census data is released, when might just have probably one meeting per month. We're still formulating that timeline, but it is a little bit fluid in terms of that timeline before the census data is released. And I'll turn it over to any of the other staff that are working on the timeline if they want to chime in and add some more information about what's coming up. Nobody's jumping on. All right.
Andrew, it's Barbara. I just want to, oh, go ahead, Hillary. It's probably the same thing.
I was just going to chime in on that, to Commissioner Brown's question, we don't have a holding period. There's not a lot of lag time. The commission does have a full schedule. As Andrew mentioned, there's housekeeping matters that are going to come up, and the commission will have a lot to do in the timeline as we move through this process.
Barbara?
Yes, that was it. Exactly. Hillary covered it. We know we want to talk about the demographer, the RFPs, just a lot of that. So those are the items that Andrew and Hillary are both discussing.
And Commissioner Brown, thank you again for raising that. I think it's very relevant. Any other comments on the motion on the floor? All right. I would like to ask, because I've got a feeling how this vote might go. Commissioner Diaz, if the vote ended up being a majority or a vast majority in favor of voting today, would you be okay with that? Because we don't have a formal rule that says we have to work by consensus or we have to work by majority vote. I just wanted to see if you had any comment you wanted to offer on what that would mean to move forward today for you. I know what your predilection is. I know how you feel about it.
Well, if we're going by majority vote today, I don't know. I just get a sense that I feel like there's a big rush. And I feel like we should, what harm is it if we would postpone our decision until after Thanksgiving is what I'm saying, or like 1 week out. That is just my offer. Yeah, I'm not saying wait till December 31st
right
to make the decision. I'm just saying because we did have some public comment today, and I thought that was very valuable, but also I like the fact that these meetings are recorded and public and we have everything on the record. And also, I think giving people the opportunity to comment on our discussion, our deliberation, is also very valuable too.
I mean, I suppose for my part, the companion piece of that is similar to the interview point. Yes, it would be good to have even more time to think this through and have more discussion. On the other hand, I'm wary of looking for additional comment, especially if it's only 1 week during a holiday, and then how we may or may not be able to respond to it given understandings and statutory requirements of how the process works. So I do think one thing is clear. If we do not vote today, it's pretty clear to me that we will likely have to have 2 meetings before December 31st, one to vote and one to do at least some of the minimal housekeeping. I don't mean, Andrew, to put you on the spot on that, but would that be a likely scenario if we did not vote today?
I would agree, yes. At least one other meeting for the selection process, or however many meetings are necessary. And then it would be important to have at least one meeting with the full commission to, at the very least, swear in the commissioners and adopt the bylaws and, go through some of those administrative items.
Hillary?
That's right. I agree with Andrew.
Can I make a comment too? This feels very personal to Commissioner Diaz, and I don't want her to feel like my vote is an insult to her or not taking her feelings to heart. But I do have other concerns about taking comment for a week, because if we change our discussion after that week, I think it could open us up to a lot of more claims of unfairness. It seems like we have had time to do a thoughtful, and I think we all have done a thoughtful selection process so far. I think all the candidates are very qualified. It is a tough decision. Not everyone will get what they want, obviously. I still don't think that a week of public comment will change our decision. And if it does, I think that may open us up to even more possible criticism.
Commissioner?
Could I make a comment too? I'm so impressed with the amount of detailed analysis that everyone has made about all of these candidates. If I thought there were new information that we hadn't had access to, I would say, of course, let's wait. But the fact is, we're dealing with an incomplete set of information, and we only have the candidates to choose from that have met the criteria thus far. It's not going to be a perfect match. And I can't imagine that we would change our mind for other than personal reasons. We've done the analysis, and let's vote on it.
Thank you for that. Any other comments before I offer one closing comment on the motion?
Good job today.
No, this is, look, I appreciate it. And I think Commissioner Chen, you were very explicit about it, but I think it's implied in everyone's comments. There is lots of mutual respect. And I really do think that, yeah, these are hard choices to make. I'll go back again to what Commissioner Brown said about looking to the future. It's not just what we anticipate over the next 10 years. It's given that we face some hard decisions to make. Whatever commission we have of 14 is going to have to continue to address the different challenges and the weaknesses in our commission. If I bring my wife for public comment, you will get an earful about how inadequate I am on respect for gender. That's a different issue.
Don't bring her.
And she'd be a better candidate. But I do try to do my best. And honestly, in all seriousness, I think from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's a fairly serious majority that is committed to the decision and thoughts that have already been made and the positions taken. So with that in mind, Commissioner Diaz, is there anything else you want to ask before I call for a vote on the motion?
No, I think you stated it beautifully. Thank you. Thank you for your leadership.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. All right. With that, we have a motion on the floor. On voting for a yes vote for this motion means we will vote today on the 6th. Andrew, do we need to take a roll call on this, or can we just do the ayes and nays?
A roll call would be preferential, just so we have it clear for the record. So I'll just go quickly. Commissioner Brown?
Yeah, aye.
Commissioner Caterina?
Aye.
Commissioner Chen?
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz?
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson?
Aye.
Commissioner Larson?
Aye.
Vice Chair Russ?
Aye.
And Chair Bain?
Aye.
Great. Motion passes unanimously.
Very good. All right. Now, given we have limited time, let me see if I can phrase it this way so that we've satisfied all the elements of a discussion. Do I have a motion on the floor to approve the list of 6 candidates that we've now adopted for decision with confirmation that we are meeting all the statutory requirements incumbent on us in these choices? Do I have a motion along those lines?
I move that.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Vice Chair Russ, seconded by Commissioner Larson. Is there discussion? Seeing none, Andrew, I'll ask you to call the roll one more time.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner Katarina,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Commissioner Larson,
Aye.
Vice Chair Russ,
Aye.
and Chair Bame.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, that motion passes unanimously with all commissioners being present and voting aye.
Commissioner
Very,
Diaz, if we meet in person, I will buy you a cup of coffee. Thank you for your cooperation.
and Commissioner Chen has to buy me a cup of coffee too, because we're getting done on time.
I'll buy all of you a cup of coffee.
I just still look forward to us all meeting together sometime. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate the willingness to compromise and most importantly, to hear each other. That concludes the business before the commission today. I want to thank my fellow
Mr.
commissioners.
Bame,
I'm sorry,
before-
please.
just a couple of comments. So for these commissioners that were selected, congratulations to those individuals. My office will be reaching out to them to send them notification that they have been selected and working through some of the administrative pieces for their onboarding. And we did have one request to speak on the selection of the date and time for the next meeting, Chair Bame, if we could call on that individual.
Sure, please.
And let me just pull up.
I believe that was Jacqueline Cotto.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. And Jacqueline, you'll have 3 minutes to address the commission on the selection of the date and time for the next meeting. And we're not seeing her unmute herself. And so this individual may have stepped away, but Mr. Chair, it would be appropriate to proceed at this point with your concluding remarks.
I will, and I'll do it with respect that if maybe we can come back to her in just a moment, but that concludes our work for today. I do want to thank all my fellow commissioners for their diligent work in meeting the required criteria. On behalf of the commission, I want to express our thanks and appreciation to all those who offered written oral comment for today's meeting. It was much appreciated, as I think has been said. And of course, I want to also express the appreciation of the commission and thanks for the fine work and support of Mr. Potter, of Ms. Gibson, of the entire staff and council for their support. With the commission now selected, Mr. Potter will be in touch with us on the date and agenda for our next meeting. I will remind you and ask Mr. Potter to remind us and Ms. Gibson that we, in keeping with the Brown Act, are best to remain in effect out of touch with each other, except on procedural matters. I do want to make sure though that you're prepared for some housekeeping, is it fair to say, and required briefings at the next meeting, which I'm sure we'll have the agenda and plenty of time to consider. Fair?
That is correct. Yes.
Good.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for you, Andrew.
Yes.
Now that we've selected the additional 6, and then there'll be a new selection or possibly the same people for the chair and co-chair. Does that, is it just the selection of those people that has to be done before the end of the year? Or does the whole, the new commission, the new chairman and vice chair and anything else, any housekeeping stuff that has to be done before the end of the year? Or is it just those, have we done what we need to do before the end of the year today?
The desire would be for the full commission to meet before the end of the year to swear in these 6 additional commissioners, just to have on the record that they have all met and that the commission is fully formed before December 31st. And then if we can fit in some of those other administrative items, I think that would be our goal and our intent, should all of the commissioners be available to do that. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Brown?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Great.
And in particular, because I have a vested interest in this, I would love to see us have a vote on the full-time chair and vice chair if in the next meeting, if we can. I should just ask, did everyone get and return the oath of office card?
Yes.
Very good. Excellent. So we're moving forward on that. Thank you. given that we're at the end of the time, and I don't think we've heard from Ms. Kodo. Very
We have
good.
not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so thanks again. Best wishes for a safe and happy holiday season to all of you. This meeting is adjourned at 3:59 p.m. Thank you.
Wow.
Mhm.